One thing that I do see as a theme emerging is people coming from boot camps and then struggling to get seen and kind of figuring out, well, what does the next step look like? What do you think about that, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super common problem, in this kind of current job market. It was just a couple of years ago when you could graduate from a boot camp and there's sort of this like surplus of opportunities, and people didn't have as much of a struggle just kind of getting right in to these engineering teams that could mentor you and grow you, right? Nowadays it's a little different. And people are still seeing success, but what we're seeing is that it's harder just to sort of get that consistent stream of interviews right out of a boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that goes into that, but I think a couple things that I would really highlight and focus on are, what are you doing while you're job searching, right? How are you engaged? How are you proactively being generative with this new skill set that you got from your boot camp? And that can be anything. It can be doing your own projects. It can be doing freelance work. It can be collaborating with a designer or someone else, on just kind of building something out. That is going to be huge. And not only just to have good stories to talk about, when it comes to your interview and stuff like that, but it's also going to cause you to go deeper in your skill set. It's also going to cause you to make decisions, right, that are a little bit more ambiguous, where when you're in a boot camp, right, you might have a lot of decisions made for you in terms of, what technology should I use? How should I go about X, Y, or Z? When you start to do that stuff on your own, right, you actually have to make decisions. You have to pull the trigger on something, and that really starts to give you more of a feel for, what a day in the life is actually like as a software engineer or a software developer. So I would encourage everyone on here. I would just ask, like, how are you being proactive with your skill set? We heard a couple interesting backgrounds, right? We heard coaching, athletics. We heard, who was it? There was someone else that came from
Beauty.
beauty industry. Yeah. Okay. The other thing I would say is, like, if you can find a channel that aligns with your previous experience to demonstrate your skill set, that's even better, because now you're pairing, the experience that you actually have, from your prior industry, and you're bringing that into this new technological skill set that you have. So that also should give you confidence, right? Because that makes you unique. Not
Mm-hmm.
everyone is coming from the beauty industry. Not everyone is coming from coaching and athletics, right?
Mm-hmm.
What unique problems do you face in those industries that people might not face coming out of a computer science degree, for instance. There are going to be things and perspectives that you bring to the table that really are high value. So the other thing I would say is, it's really important not to undervalue where you're coming from. And everything that you're doing as you're looking to make this career transition, you want to leverage every single thing that's available to you within your background. So I think that's how I would kick it off. Make sure that you're being proactive, and make sure that's aligned with the
Mm-hmm.
value that you already have in your experience from where you're coming from.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. So, just to reflect some of that back, everyone that's, you know, doing anything from self teaching to boot camp to doing projects, you're already on a learning journey, moving into tech, pivoting, kind of figuring out what this looks like. And you actively are seeking ways to grow your skills. So, this can look like building projects while you're job searching, finding team projects to collab on, even publicly sharing your learning process, whether it's additional courses you're taking or just trying out some new tech. So that is all ways that you can be proactive. But the other part is sort of not talked about as much, or maybe not clear the path there, which is what's truly impacting you in your job search, like the outcomes of building relationships with people who can help you find paid work opportunities. You can only freelance and volunteer for so long. So the first part is basically skill building to create confidence over time in your skills. And this is so important. So Nate did a lot of freelance work at first, and in fact, turned that into a really thriving business. It turns out I did the same thing. I did not know I was doing this, but my first experience in tech was doing freelance, small business, small websites for businesses, right? So you start wherever you're at. But then let's talk about the second part, Nate, of actually finding those relationships that can help you along the way. So finding advocates, mentors, recruiters, hiring managers. What does
Yeah.
that look like? What does that step look like?
Yeah, I think it really stems from kind of trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's really, really hard to do this when you have a specific goal that you're working towards, which for these people that are going through this very difficult process is making a career transition and actually like making real money doing this stuff, right? So you have to understand that, when you're trying to network with people, when you're trying to build those relationships, um, you have to bring real value to the table in some capacity. And basically, what that means is you don't just, most importantly, you don't just pop into someone's DM and ask them for something right away to make sure that you're building, those real relationships. And kind of going back to what I said before, I think it's really important to lean on the things that you have in common with these different connections or these different people that you're wanting to talk to. Um, Often, people will tell me like, I don't really know where to start when networking. What do I say to people? And that makes a ton of sense. But um, one thing that I often say is, if you're reaching out to people who have shared background or context with you, you're going to naturally have things to talk about, right? And it's not going to feel as transactional. So again, kind of leaning into, what your background is, where you're coming from, any shared communities. Guys, people really, really undervalue their known community that they've had for years. That can be your biggest asset when changing careers, and not everyone has the same level of community. But what I would say is, if you're neglecting that, if you haven't actually gone through the people that have known you for 5, 10 years, and said to them, hey, I'm becoming a coder, I am a coder, do you know of anyone who might be relevant to me? They are already going to be an advocate for you. They already know you well. They're already invested in your success to some level. So you need to tap into that, and you need to make sure that you're going down that path, and not leaving those conversations unhad. I think, um, when I reflect on like my initial freelance opportunities, it started with people in my general network, right? When people describe like kind of falling into that sort of thing, it's usually not because they're going out and proactively marketing their services, right? They usually have some opportunity with someone that they know, or someone one connection away, right? With someone who can vouch for them, and that's how they're able to bridge that gap. Because what you don't have right now is paid experience, so you need something else. You need to have that trust in another way in order to, sort of bridge the gap, to those types of opportunities. And you can start those small, and those can be very, simple and not technically complex, right? My first project was a simple WordPress site, and I got paid like $100 for it, right? And very quickly, I was able to sort of slowly notch up the complexity and get to the point where I had, a full stack software engineering skill set, and that happened organically, instead of just me trying to do it all at once, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So to reflect that back, we all start at zero. We all start somewhere, wherever you are. That's your starting point. I know it may feel maybe chaotic or frustrating to kind of look at others and compare yourself. So if you're stuck in a comparison mindset, or you hear a lot of self-judgment going on, that may be part of the process, and that may be something you can look at in terms of some personal growth that can go along with career growth. However, wherever you are in the learning journey in your career in tech, everyone starts at zero. So understand where you're at and see where in the process you can kind of build more experience or connections, or this term called social capital or network, right? Look at the process as an ecosystem, not one task or one thing. It's not only skill building, it's relationship building, right? It's not all technical. It's about creating trust with others. So, like Nate was saying, there are people that you have trust with today. They would be more than happy to help you and recommend you to their people, right? Whether you're trying to build your first website or create an app or just get more work experience, right? More technical knowledge. There are ways that you can lean on the people you know today, even if they're your parents. Maybe they know someone who knows someone. You never know. So
Right.
following up
That's
on
right.
that, I want to kind of mention two things that I've been finding, Nate. So a lot of people that are either career changers, job seekers, or both fall into two main camps. Either you're not getting interviews because you're probably relying on cold apps, or just things aren't working out. Could be anything. It's not your fault. And the second camp is you're getting interviews, but you don't really know how to move forward, or you're just like dropping off at some point. So these are two camps that a lot of people fall into, no matter your experience. You can have 100 years of work experience and still be dropping off in some interviews, right? Or
Mhm.
really struggling to get interviews. So maybe we can address the first camp. If you're not seeing any interviews and you've put in, let's say, 3 solid months of sending applications, what do you do then? How do you turn things around?
Totally. When you say sending applications, are you simply referring to like cold applications there?
That's what I've been hearing from most people. So that's what I assume a lot of people are doing, just because that's what the common knowledge of what a job search
Totally.
is.
Yeah. I think like, you know, kind of going back to putting yourself in the shoes of whoever is looking at these applications, right? Um, there's just a lot of applications, right? So if you unless you get on that list early, or you know someone who can give you a referral, unfortunately your resume is probably just going to get lost in the stack more often than not. I mean, Anna, you and I have both talked to people who have put in thousands of applications and only get like a handful of interviews from that. At a certain point, like, it's not about resume optimization. At a certain point, you have to change the game, right? Because those are not going to give you winning chances, right? So yeah, honestly, what I would say is if you're really discouraged with cold applications, stop doing it. I'm not saying stop doing it forever, but give yourself a month or a few weeks where you just tell yourself, hey, I'm not going to do cold applications anymore. I'm just going to focus on building relationships, getting over this hump where I'm afraid of networking, and really kind of go down that path in earnest. And I think you'll find that, you know, you're going to have a lot more momentum and you're going to get more opportunities because you're going to be in conversations with people who know about job openings before they're posted. And you're going to be having proactive discussions with people who can vouch for you, right? And who, you know, you have that trust with already. So I would say people will still get opportunities with cold applications. I'm not saying it's never going to work, and I'm not saying it's not going to work for you. But if you've been on that grind, especially if you've been maybe like neglecting this networking stuff and this relationship building, it's time, right? Like use that as a reason to actually try to go down this path in earnest. And what I would add to that is be open. Don't just be looking for one specific thing. You know, you're not getting interviews right now, but there will come a point in time when you are able to get interviews and you want to be the most well-rounded developer that you can be at that point in time. So interviews is not the only thing you're looking for here, right? You can glean from other engineers, you can get projects, you can do collaborations, you can even make money doing freelance projects. And that's going to obviously be huge because you're going to be like, wow, I can actually make money with this skill set. And it's going to build you, right? In terms of your technical prowess, in terms of your confidence. And you'll start to see like, I can do hard things. I can figure out hard things. And those are going to be amazing stories to tell in interviews, right? Um, you're going to have to actually solve problems for other people rather than just kind of going through the types of things that the boot camp have you go through. And that's gonna fill in a lot of gaps for your confidence and your technical ability. And yeah, so I just encourage you to be open as well to other types of other types of goals for your networking besides just getting interviews. Lean into that. Lean into all of those resources that Anna has, and her content that she shares on LinkedIn. It is gold.
Thank you.
So yeah.
So one thing that I was reminded of is when I graduated university, it was 2008, and I had no clue how to get a job. First of all, I didn't even know about the tech industry. All I knew was I was good at organizing things, so I'm going to do something in project management. And I tried my hand at a couple of interviews, and I was just so naive and so baffled. I had literally zero clue about what was going on. All of you here that have been in this transition for even a couple of months already have more information than I have or had. There's so many more resources now than there was before. So what Nate was talking about was reminding me when I didn't know what to do to make money, never, not even in the tech industry in general. I was like, I have no idea how to start my life. I started doing something that I was really passionate about, which was creating art events. So for a year, I spent my time full time, wasn't getting paid, just for fun. I had some backup money, but basically I was really passionate about bringing artists together and putting on creative events, and that was something I wanted to accomplish and see what I could do, and I did that. However, I did not monetize that, which meant I couldn't continue doing that if I can't pay my rent, right? So what I did was start sharing these events that I was putting on a WordPress website, and then I built a website for my dad who owns a dental practice, right? He's like, why don't you build me a website? So inadvertently, by just following what I really love to do, I learned skills without even knowing that these were valuable skills that people pay thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for, right? I just kind of fell into that. And from there, I happened to find a freelance opportunity. I obviously was not even looking, had no clue. You can't imagine, I had no idea. And that gave me work experience. But I have no idea what to do at all. I like events. Why don't I just put on some events, right? So just finding ways to be proactive and finding ways for those proactive activities to help connect you with people, that's the key there. So what do you think about that, Nate?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting story, and I think like one call out that I would mention to people is like when you're trying to find these like freelance opportunities or sort of find these opportunities to fall into it, it's not like interviews where you have to get a bunch of interviews to like be successful. You really just need like one or two like freelance opportunities, for instance, and then it kind of goes from there because once you're able to demonstrate your value to someone and they're willing to pay you for it, that gives you a ton of confidence. And not to be like spooky or anything, but I think the energy that you start putting out into the world sort of starts to attract more of those types of opportunities, right? So once you have not only the skill set, but you see that, oh, someone needs this, and then, oh, they're willing to pay me for it. That is really, really powerful. Not just to get you work experience, but like I did, I was able to build that into a thriving freelance consultancy. I didn't have like a bunch of employees or anything, but it was really good income for me. for 5 years, and I kind of built my young adult life on that. And that showed me, pretty early on that there are these different paths that you don't have to go, this very specific narrow way of, getting the credentials, and then hoping that you get an interview, and then hoping that you nail the interview, right? There's a lot of hoping in that process. And really, if you can take away the hoping by kind of showing yourself that there's these other ways to go, um, you know, there's just you'll find that there's a lot of different opportunities out there to get to where you want to go quicker.
And one thing that's really interesting is that a client of mine, which moved from teaching to UX design and is really interested in UX research, she started networking with her first connections, and somehow someone that she knew from some other people, like friends of friends of friends, were in the industry of water treatment, something to do with water. And there was a conference in her city in this industry. And her a friend was able to give her a free ticket, and she went to this conference. And she met a startup that is in this space that has an app, which means they're not tech first, but they're tech adjacent. And they didn't have anyone to work in the design or research space because they're not really thinking about it. But they met her and they really, really liked her. And she's almost baffled that the founder is like constantly asking her to come on board and work with them, and followed up with her multiple times, even though she was not following up with them. They just really like her, and she has the skills that she wants to practice and get real world experience. And who would have known? It's completely random. You would never think, right? But tech is part of so many places in our world today. If you go to, the rock climbing gym, a lot of like tech people are into rock climbing, or I don't know, ceramics, or whatever hobbies you do, you will meet people that are, working in different places, and you never know where that can lead you. So opportunities are hidden unless you explore, right? So having a curious and open mindset, whatever you need to do to get there, do that. It will allow you to explore opportunities that could look like freelance, volunteer, group projects, going to a random conference, whatever comes your way, essentially.
Yeah.
So I want to address the second camp of people. So let's say you have some experience or projects and that's showing up. You've been networking a little or a lot, and you've been applying. So whatever you're doing seems to work and been getting you interviews. Maybe you even have a year or two of work experience, right? But you seem to be getting stuck in that middle place of, I'm getting the same feedback or I'm not getting the offer. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard place to be. You're so close. You're like at the last step, right? And you've invested so much in getting to this point. I think, like, first, a word of encouragement is keep going, right? That's the first thing. Um, you know, it takes what you've done already to get to this point to where you're getting interviews is harder than actually beating an interview, right? You just have to recognize that, it's a hard waiting period, and it's a waiting period that is so emotionally charged. You're dealing with rejections, you're dealing with anxiety potentially going into these interviews, you're dealing with probably some uncertainty in your new skill set. There's all kinds of things. Um, a couple quick things that I would mention is, first of all, having multiple opportunities will always help you, right? And I don't know, I'm not stopping there because I know that might not be super helpful. Of course, having multiple interviews, is going to help you. But my point there is, if you are hanging all of your hopes on one specific interview, that probably means you're not in the camp that you think you're in, you might need to shore up your process for getting these interviews to make sure that it's not just these, once in a blue moon interview opportunities that you're getting. Because if that's the case, then there's naturally just going to be a lot more pressure on these individual opportunities, right? And you can't avoid that all the time, right? But if we're talking about you know, optimizing your success for the long term, you may be better off going back and revisiting your process to have more interview volume so that you have more room for learning or for building your confidence in that arena. So that's the first thing I would say is double check that you're actually in the category that you think you're in. Okay. The second thing that I would say is it's so important that you're not accidentally practicing the things that you're already comfortable with. This is something that I did, and I think everybody does accidentally, is when they're prepping for interviews, they don't actually practice being caught off guard. You have to practice being caught off guard, and you have to have a plan. So, what do I mean? I think people think that interviews are about, or people tend to think, from what I've worked with a lot of people going through this process, they they tend to gravitate towards trying to memorize questions, trying to memorize you know different coding problems. The study approach doesn't really have a whole lot of methodology to it necessarily, and so you kind of go into the interviews, not you're very nervous because you don't feel equipped with the process, and honestly you've probably, maybe you're doing some leak code stuff, and maybe when you do your practice sessions you naturally gravitate towards the questions that you can do, right? And maybe you kind of do it on accident, but it's really really important that you have a bulletproof prep strategy, and has to include practicing getting caught off guard, practicing that punch in the gut feeling when you come across a problem that you haven't seen before or haven't had to work through yet. That's what you're practicing for. So I would encourage you to take another look at your interview prep strategy and make sure that it is including those hard things, because you can either square up to that in the interview or square up to that beforehand, right? So making sure that you're practicing, that stuff, and it's hard to practice, right? It's not great to have to feel those feelings, before you feel them in the interview, but that is really going to be a big differentiator between candidates that are able to perform well in interviews versus, you know, candidates that might, be passed on for any given opportunity.
Yeah. So, what helped you practice some of those more difficult situations where maybe you were asked something that you didn't think about, or uh, in a technical sense, or maybe in behavioral? What helped you go through that process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think the biggest things that I would say, making sure that you're randomizing your question set. So making sure that as you're starting your interview, if you're doing like interview prep sessions, um, and I'll put a sub note, time yourself and have the timer in front of you. It's gonna you need to manage your time, right, when you're going through these interviews, both for behavioral and for technical. You don't want to ramble on and on about anything. You want to be concise, and you want to, so you need to know how long questions take you to answer, and then make sure you're randomizing your question set. So you should not be practicing interviews in your head, because if you get stuck in your head during your interview prep, you're gonna get stuck in your head during the interview. So you have to be doing this all out loud, as if an interviewer was sitting right in front of you. Um, always take a second. Don't feel like you have to start talking right away. In technical interviews or in behavioral interviews, there have been several times when I have paused for up to a minute or 2 minutes to think about the best answer. You're not going to get penalized for that. So practice that awkward pause, because you're going to need to take it, right? So make sure that you're make sure that you're actually accounting for these types of things that are beyond just the whether or not you get the coding question right. And then for technical stuff, I would say um, you need to have a process, and it's maybe not something that makes sense to get into the weeds on a live call like this, but there are processes that you can step through. So even if you've got a question you don't know, you can demonstrate your problem solving ability, you can demonstrate your communication abilities, and you can demonstrate clear thinking um, to your interviewer. And it's really, really important to be equipped with that. Um, because likely if when you're in interview season, you're gonna have these times when, for me, it feels like a punch in the gut. Oh, I wasn't expecting this type of question for this interview. Oh, I've never seen this kind of thing before. Oh, I thought this one was going to be behavioral. Like all that stuff. That's what's important to prepare for.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And one other thing on interviews, people mistake interviews for interrogations. If you do think of interviews that way, one super easy way to improve interviewing, which has nothing to do with even you practicing any answers or just you, is to engage in active listening and ask a question back.
Mm.
So, what that looks like is me paraphrasing what Nate just said and saying, is there anything else you'd like to share? Right? So, in an interview, usually you will be asked a question and then you'll answer, but then you'll sit back and stare at them. If you've ever experienced this, what you can do instead is after you've said your answer, you can continue the conversation. What that looks like is after your answer, you can say, I hope that answers what you asked me. I'm happy to share any more details. Another example of that is to relate what they just asked you and ask it back to them and say, this is, a great experience that I hope shares what I went through. What does this look like in your company? So if they're asking you about communication, about conflict, about time management, productivity, whatever, right? Even if it's a technical thing, you can turn it back to them because you know what? Their questions reflect what they care about in the company. And they're looking for people that can meet their expectations of communicating well and helping them do their job. Because why is anyone hire anyone? Like, why are there open job openings? Nate, what do you think?
That is such a great question. Um, I'm gonna have to take a second to think about it. Yeah, because I think if you can really be clear about the answer to this for yourself, you will automatically do things that you need to do in order to be the best candidate. But I think what you said makes perfect sense. Aligning to the team's goals, being able to contribute, being able to add value, and being able to, like, I think push back and like not just be someone who um, just pushes paper around and whatever. I mean, there's certainly a time and place for that, but as engineers, like, you're supposed to have an opinion and you're supposed to contribute your thoughts. All of that adds value to a company. So
So let me
people are
ask you,
hiring you
Nate,
for, yeah.
when you were interviewing at Amazon, why did Amazon have that job opening?
The sort of like easy answer to that is, oh, corporate approved headcount, right?
That's a good
So they're
start.
hiring. Yeah. So corporate approved headcount, right? And then the teams they're building for future growth. They want to get more customers, so they have to
Growth,
build more
number
features.
one reason any company hires ever. Do you know any company that can go from 0 to 100 million or whatever their goals are with the people they have today? I don't know that. Sure, they can
Yeah, no.
stay at 100K revenue or a million revenue or whatever, but if they're public or if they want to go
Yeah.
public and if they just raised money, what do you think they raise money for? They raise money so they can spend money. What are they going to spend this money on? People. Why are they spending money on people? Why would I give $5 million to Nate to start his company? Because I want to make money too. It's called an investment, right? And then for Nate to make back a certain percentage to pay me back, he's going to have to make a lot of money. So people equals growth equals money. That's the ecosystem we're in. Super, super
Yep.
simplified. Once you see it like that, it's not confusing anymore.
Yeah.
But the details are very important. So what you're doing when you're networking, interviewing, or working for a job that they're paying you for, hundreds of thousands of dollars, is helping someone do something or providing value of some kind. So, Nate's on a team at Amazon. This product hopefully is live, or maybe it's not live yet, but Amazon has plans to make money with this product. So Nate's contribution is valued at a certain financial amount, and that is relative to how much they want to make, right? And they have a team of engineers that combine their efforts to create a product that will make exponentially more dollars than each engineer individually. So Nate and his team are helping Amazon create a product that will help them make money. Where does that fall into like the day-to-day relational perspective? Engineering managers have a job, and that is to find good people to work well together to build products. So we're all helping each other in different ways. Nothing has to be 100% transactional or 100% relational. So I see a question about, is networking making friends, but the grown-up version? Yes, essentially yes. But it's not like I'm going out there and treating every conversation like my best friend, because that's just not possible. Numbers wise and life wise, we have priorities. Like, your family is going to take precedence over the 20 new DM conversations on LinkedIn, right? What you're doing is going into this middle ground of having light touches of conversation. So if I'm DMing someone, I find a way that I can give them value. I can do this by asking them questions about themselves, because we all like to talk about ourselves. I can do this by sharing a resource. For example, I share resources with all of you all the time. I know that that gives you value. That helps me by build you wanting to learn more about me and Nate, and kind of like then we build the ecosystem out from there. So just by existing, you are valuable. And by wanting to have a conversation with someone, you are giving them value. And anything else on top of that is like extra, right? You can send them a resource, you can share an opinion that's interesting, but you don't have to be like, oh my God, we have to be friends right now. And anyways, friendship takes time to develop. It's a process. So you will not meet like every single person that's like a great person to talk with, but a percentage of them, there will be a funnel. And if you meet 10 new people today, maybe one of them will still be in your camp and helping you along the way. And that's fine. That's where the numbers matter. That's why posting publicly matters. Attracting the right people matters. So it's this combination of things. What do you think about that, Nate?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. And I think the important part of that is that you have to do it, and you have to do it consistently, because again, it is kind of about the numbers, right? You're not gonna message your first person ever, and that's gonna magically get you this wonderful opportunity. I mean, I'm sure people have stories like that, but likely what you need is, you need to become the type of person that is comfortable doing this stuff and is excited about doing this stuff and is excited about putting that value out in the world. And once you do that, now you have, these touches all the time, right? People are seeing your profile, you're chatting with people, and you're comfortable doing that. So really the biggest thing is getting over whatever internal blockers you have to become the type of person who does this stuff consistently. Um, yeah.
So one thing that I want to address is something that Rebecca mentioned about applying to a lot of jobs and getting rejections. Maybe we can talk about this concept of rejection emails. I think it's really messing
Mhm.
people up. It certainly was hard for me when I was going through it, and I'm sure you didn't like it either. No one likes it. Rejection emails suck, and those emails just shouldn't exist. However, they do, so we're going to talk about them. And another comment that Isaac was talking about, what is expected of candidates, kind of like how to be in this market, how to kind of navigate the process. I think that could be helpful. So the first thing is those emails that we get that they're simply part of the process, and that's okay. What this means is that the application that hiring teams are using has an email template. And when they have either enough people, they hired someone, or who knows what, they click send and this email goes out. Do you think they really looked at your profile? Usually not. When they look at your profile is when they actually send an email that has some details about your profile, or if it's a person. A lot of times hiring isn't personal because the systems, the literal tech that is built for hiring is broken. There are people on LinkedIn today that are trying to solve this. It's a really, really big problem. I don't know when or how it will be solved, but the experience that everyone has is just part of this really broken system, and it really affects your self-esteem. So maybe you can add to how you dealt with this, Nate, and what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I think it's just, first of all, it's really important that it's not an active rejection, meaning like they're looking at your profile and saying no, and then you get the rejection. It's more like they've actively picked up candidates that they're interested in for whatever reason, probably because people referred them from networking, right? And then they send this email to everybody. And then the email goes something like, we have not found a position that aligns with your skill sets, which is not, that's like my least favorite one. Um, or we've, we're proceeding with other candidates is another way they'll word it, right? But it's all kind of coming out of this system. So it does suck, and I don't think there's any way around that, but you have to just understand that like you're you're not getting actively rejected more than likely. You are it you when you This is why interviews are so hard, because with interviews you are getting actively rejected. Unfortunately, that's when the active rejection's happening. So if you're not getting to the interviews, it's not about your skill set, it's not about your abilities, it's about your process for getting those interviews. And then you'll find out more about what, and I think kind of tying it into Isaac's question, you'll find out more about what's required of you once you get to the interview process, once you've been able to get to this point where your process is such that you're able to get interviews, right? So, um, anyway, I think like yeah, you just have to understand like what that means in the process. It doesn't mean that they've actively said like, "Oh, you don't know enough languages," or "Oh, you don't," it's nothing like that. It's really just that they found the candidates they're looking for, and then they send this automated email to everybody else. And I've gotten tons of
Exactly.
those emails.
I set up a
Yep.
filter so they just go to one place. And
There
I
you go.
check it to see if I caught any wrong ones. But yeah, so these emails that you get, think of it like a loop. You spend 2 seconds or a few minutes clicking send, and they spend 2 seconds clicking send on their end, okay? And no one connects at all. What was the interaction there? I don't know. There was no interaction. They don't know you exist, and you don't really know that much about them either. So, if you are actively interested in a company, that's where the networking comes in. So, you don't have to drop sending cold applications entirely, what you want to do is focus most of your time. So let's say 10% of your week, maybe 2, 3 hours tops, is sending cold apps, finding who's hiring. The rest of your week, not every day, but some days, you find people that are in companies and you interact with them. So if they're posting, you engage with them. If they're not posting, maybe you ask to connect. Look at what posts the company is making, engage with those posts. Basically, there's so many things, elements, that the social elements, the social media element that is provided and available for you. What I'm seeing is we don't know how to take advantage of that. So that's basically what I teach. That's what Nate teaches. So if you don't know how to take advantage of what's in front of you, or you don't even know like that it's an actual tool, that's where we get confused and frustrated. What else would you like to add, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. I don't think I have anything to add to that specific one. Besides, good
What
job.
about, thank you. What about when you were freelancing? What are some tools you used even back then that helped you kind of build relationships with people?
So what it was is just being open to this idea that like I have value to add in my skill set and not being closed up about that because I wasn't looking to other coders to give me my sense of worth in terms of my skill set. I saw early on that I could provide value to, and you made this distinction earlier, which I think is really interesting. You said tech adjacent versus tech first. And I think people totally miss out on this tech adjacent thing. There's so much opportunity in tech adjacent companies, people who need help with websites or apps that don't have a traditional, hiring process that you'll see in big tech. And that is all up for grabs with networking. But it starts with you not blocking yourself based on your confidence, right? So that's what I would say really helped me was just understanding that it's okay if I didn't know how to do it 100% going into the project. I had already figured out hard things. I had already gone through that loop of learning something new on the project, so I could continue to do that, and I leaned on that for my confidence to get into those future opportunities. It
Yeah,
wasn't
so
like, oh, this project. Yep.
something you mentioned before is the learning, leaning on the learning as
Mhm.
the area to build confidence, and like showcasing that in interviews and publicly posting about it, using that in your networking. Like the fact that you're learning is something of value.
That's right. That's right.
So one thing that I think would be interesting to cover briefly is Rebecca and Isaac mentioned freelancing, since you kind of talked about that and we covered
Yep.
that. So is freelancing the only path? What are some other paths? Who should freelance? What do you have to say about that?
It is not the only path. It is definitely not the only path. I like that path because it's the path that I took. But that's kind of how we all sort of, we all kind of prefer the path that we took. Um, I think collaborative projects with other people who are early in their career is another huge way to do this. I would really, really strongly encourage it to be collaborative, meaning you're not solving your own problems in isolation, but you're working with maybe another junior UX designer or another developer or a little team that you put together to build out an idea. And you can sort of put into practice this social, sharing about it as well as a team rather than just as an individual. So um, I would say like freelance is definitely a path that you can take, but it's not the only path. And I would say even if you want to practice networking, one way that you can do that is just by networking with people who are kind of on the same path that you're on. And those are that's kind of a nice way to ease into it, right? So you can connect with people who are either trying to get the same job that you're trying to get or adjacent to it. So they're trying to get into project management, they're trying to get into design if you're a developer. those roles all work together, right? So build something with someone else that's trying to do this as well, and then that's going to give you more confidence. It's going to give you better stories to tell in interviews, and yeah, that's equally as good as an option going forward in terms of growing your skill set and filling in those gaps. Yeah,
So basically, the moral is work with other people, build whatever makes sense to start.
yeah, and importantly, I would say like try not to do it in isolation. I think it's important that you're getting practice working with a team, that you're getting practice solving problems that other people are bringing to you. Because when you do something in isolation, you can kind of give up on this feature over here that you didn't want to do. Where if you're doing it for someone else, you have a lot more pulling you through that friction because someone's expecting you to do it, right? And to a lesser extent, if you're working with people on just like a project in like a little a group that you put together, you'll have designers who design something a certain way, and you have to make it do that thing, right? And that's important, I think, to have things pulling you through the friction where otherwise you would maybe give up or not have the momentum to carry through with that project.
Yeah. So when you do get the job or the project, whatever you're aiming for to get started, you're never going to work by yourself, like entirely. Either you have a client with certain expectations, or you have teammates that expect something of you, and you have them. So everything that we do is a social endeavor. You don't want to be a team of one, or whatever metaphor is best. Um, Find people to rely on and create things that you can help them with. Have a mindset that enables you to feel inspired to build things. Everyone that's done any kind of boot camp has always talked about wanting to build and being in the driver's seat of creating something, becoming a creator. Your projects are not going to be built in isolation. There's no like secret genius in the room. So you're good at getting hired, whether it's freelance, part time, full time, whatever. People are paying you to not only create things in code, but to work with other people to create things together. Right?
Mm,
So maybe we'll leave it at that for today.
yeah.